Welcome back to another Post Media Ottawa Senators panel. I'm Bruce Garriock, pleased to be joined today by my colleague Ken Warren of the Ottawa Citizen and Ottawa Sun, and TSN 1200's Dean Brown, the longtime play-by-play voice of the Ottawa Senators. Guys, thanks for joining us. And as we speak this morning, the Senators have gone on a 7-2-1 run pre-Christmas. Have they put themselves back in the playoff picture yet? No, but they are climbing in the standings. Dean, let's start with you. What do you think has led to this turnaround?
I think just a bit more maturity. I think, and I know people don't like to talk about this, but they've gotten some bounces that they weren't getting before. They're certainly suffering just as many injuries to the wrong people, but they seem to be able to play through that. And I think the other big thing, the two biggest things are the play of the power play, number one, and number two, goaltending. There's been some blips, but overall it's been more consistent than it was earlier in the year. And for any team in this league, you just don't win if you don't have consistent goaltending. They've been getting more of that, and they've been getting more wins. So I don't think it's one thing. It's like almost always, it's I think a confluence of a couple of different things.
You know, Ken, you look at Dean mentioned the power play, and I want to talk about that a little bit. And you guys can tell me if I'm going off kilter here a little bit, but I don't know that Ottawa has had a power play like this since they went to the Stanley Cup final in 2007, when they had Spezza and Heatley and Alfredson and, Redden on the back end. And you look at their options right now, Ken, I think they've got something like 17 power play goals in 10 games or something ridiculous. Like, come on.
Well, it was funny, I was asking DJ Smith about that the other day and saying, well, is it confidence? What is it that's made them suddenly come to life? And he kind of almost laughed it off and said, well, you got to have skill. And he's saying, you can say confidence and this and that. And he said, we had a lot of power play guys early on in his coaching beginning in Ottawa. But when you look at that talent and you match it up against the talent you have for a power play now, I mean, it's just when you look at that cast of characters they have now, even with Stützle out, DeBrincat is clearly finding his range now, and that goes along with Stützle goes out and you bring in Giroux. I mean, you're not, there is enough talent to spread around. And I also think Thomas Chabot's found something as a quarterback that he didn't have early in the season. He seems to be getting the puck to the net. And that just seems to be opening up different things for everybody else.
Well, and Dean, I mean, you've watched this team since day one, and obviously you look at this as Ken said, even without Tim Stützle in that game against the Habs, and they probably won't have him maybe until those two games before Christmas, if at all before Christmas. They didn't appear to miss a beat on that power play.
No, and I think, this year it's been a couple of things. Number one, a lot of new players on the power play, so I think it was going to take some time for them to get used to each other and understand each other. And I think the puck movement and the player movement has gotten a lot better over time, and that's really helped them out. The ability to make passes and connect passes. On any power play, if you can't make 4 passes, you can't get a shot, which means your power play can't do anything. So, and I think one of the other big things that the Davis Payne, I think the coach of the power play, should get some credit for, is working some stubbornness out of this power play. Other teams have outstanding coaches, and they have outstanding video coaches. And when they see your tendencies, if you're not willing to change them, they're sooner or later going to shut them down. And I think we all saw with this power play, there was 3 players on the power play who consistently were determined to make that cross slot pass, no matter how many people were in the slot, and they would get knocked down and cleared back down ice. And you go, why, but stubbornly, that's something that for some guys it's worked. And so they're going to go back to it over and over and over again. And, I think Davis Payne has done a very good job in making them understand that other people are working very hard to not let you do that. And so they found other ways. And that is what I think one of the big reasons why the power play is so much better. They still make that cross slot pass, but now they really only make it when it's there rather than trying to force something. And, I think we all know with professional athletes, as skilled and as smart and as athletic as they are, sometimes they can be very stubborn people. And so if you've got something that's worked for you before and you like doing it, lots of times you're just going to keep doing it no matter what. And Davis Payne, I think, has done a good job of taking the no matter what out of that power play.
You know, Kenny, and one of the things that Dean also brought up when we started was the goaltending.
Yeah.
And are we in a situation now, and I know we in the media like to do this, we like to anoint somebody the number one goalie, but are we seeing a stretch now where perhaps Cam Talbot is now asserting himself as the number one goalie of this team?
It'd be tend to lean that way, but again, I think Forsberg was battling some injuries in there a little bit. He was fighting through something, whether it was a groin or a knee, something in there. And good on Talbot. The opportunity was there for him to get a run of games. And it's hard to believe that his first win in Ottawa was the other night, not against Montreal, previous game, but now he's on against Anaheim, and now he's on a roll. So I think you got to use that roll as much as you can if you're DJ Smith. Let this guy roll. But then you're coming up this weekend, back-to-back afternoon games. I imagine Forsberg gets back in there for one of them.
Yeah.
And that's not a bad thing. I don't think Cam Talbot, you want to run him night after night after night. You got to have some backup there. But to the first point, yeah, I think maybe it's leaning towards Talbot getting, not all the games, but maybe 2/3 or however, 3 out of 5, however that's going to shake down.
But, it's interesting, Dean, because as I say that, I look at the schedule and think, okay, they've got Detroit Saturday. Makes sense to start Forsberg there because I would think Cam Talbot's the kind of guy who wants to play in Minneapolis on Sunday. Winnipeg Tuesday, then 2 more back-to-back games that they're going to split.
Yeah.
So as much as we want to anoint a number one, the reality is they need both.
Yeah, there's no question. I think right now it has less to do with anointing and has more to do with, Talbot was off for a long time with injuries. And if you're going to have 2 guys you can rely on, they kind of both have to be playing at the same level-ish. And I think that right now, Talbot playing more of the games has more to do with the coaching staff trying to get him going, and clearly he is now going, and get him in a rhythm so that you truly have 2 goaltenders that you don't have any issues with putting either one in at any time. And it was almost like, they had to get Talbot caught up, and he had to find his game again after being injured for so long. And I think now we're seeing that, and I think now we're probably going to get into more of what was the original plan, in that you have a schedule based on a bunch of things, past performance against certain teams and, current performance. If you're the hot guy, they're going to run you more than they're going to run the other guy. And I think what you just laid out is exactly true. I would be shocked if it isn't Forsberg in Detroit so that Cam Talbot can play against his former team in Minnesota on Sunday. But I think, Talbot now getting into a groove kind of gives them the ability to do what they always planned to do in the first place, which was have 2 goalies that they kind of had equal confidence in. And when one guy gets on a good roll, you can roll him, but you're not going to collapse when his roll is over. You hope and expect that the other guy's roll will begin. So, like I said, I think with Talbot now kind of getting in a groove after his injury, I think that only gets them back to what their original plan was.
A couple more things I want to touch on before we go is we saw the Ring of Honor ceremony for Wade Redden on Monday night before the game against the Anaheim Ducks, and there was lots of alumni on hand: Patrick Lalime, Antoine Vermette, Brian McGrattan, Chris Neal, Chris Phillips, just to name a few. There were some great messages on the video board, including Danny Heatley. Is it good to see this organization touching base with its past again?
I think it's fantastic. I think for a long time there was a dark period here for, I don't know, maybe not a decade, but the last 8-9 years, very quiet, a lot of doom and gloom around the organization. And I think bringing back Wade for the Ring of Honor, but bring him back in the organization to do some work with the young defensemen, getting them. We saw Chris Phillips return after he was gone for a year or a year and a half, coming back. We've seen a lot more of Daniel Elfridson, of course, around the rink. It ties into the Hall of Fame. It was a big moment for Senators history, not just Daniel Elfridson history, getting the Senators and the best player in franchise history, getting him recognized by the NHL. So I think all of this is very optimistic. not directly related to what's going on the ice, whether they're winning or losing. I just think in the big picture, it's great to have links to the best moments of franchise history. And the Redden, you saw again, great reaction from the fans to a guy that never missed the playoffs in his time in Ottawa, which is just phenomenal for that kind of career.
You know, Dina, and I thought they did it right. And I don't know if I mentioned this, but I thought that Emily Knight and Aaron Robinson did a fantastic job with that ceremony, because they made the Ring of Honor feel as big as retiring a number. And I think that's the best compliment you could pay. And we should both state that we sit on the player honoring committee at the same time.
Yeah, there's because of that, the rules of the player honoring committee are very similar to the Hockey Hall of Fame committee. We're not allowed to say much of anything about anything, but after a ceremony is over and the public saw it, we can comment on it. We just can't comment on any process or anybody that might be in the future considered. But yeah, I thought that the franchise did a great job, and you're right. The two people primarily at the front of that, Emily Knight and of course our good friend Aaron Robinson, who they do an unbelievable amount of great work and never get credit for it. But getting back to the point you were talking to with Kenny, it is so important for a franchise to have generational connections, because it's not just, having the old guys hang around. That's not what it is. If you want to have your fan base have generational connections, you have to foster that. And there is no question that there is a huge portion of the fan base of this team. Their connection is with the era of Daniel Alfredson and Laurie Boschman in the first year, and and Wade Redden and Chris Phillips. That's their connection, and they love the new young guys, but that's their connection to the franchise. That's their feel good era. That's the music of their life. And you hope as a franchise that your young stars of today, that young people are, they're connecting with Stützle and they're connecting with Tkachuk and they're connecting with Batherson. That's that's how you maintain that generational connection to your team, is you always keep those different generations involved in the team. So it's that feel good between the fans and the team, that the guys that I love are still with the team. And it is so, I think it was so important for the franchise to reestablish those connections, because it only ties you more solidly to your fan base, all levels of your fan base. There's older people, there's people my age, they like them new young guys, that Stützle is good and everything, but and that's good. But their connection is that memory, that love affair they had with those earlier teams and those earlier players. And so when you have all the generations of connection with the team, that helps cement all the generations of fandom with the team. And I just think there's no bad side to reestablishing a lot of these connections.
Well, it was great to make a connection with you guys. Thanks to Ken Warren of the Ottawa Citizen and Ottawa Sun, and Dean Brown, the play-by-play voice of the Ottawa Senators on TSN 1200. Thanks for joining me today, and we'll be back next week with a special Christmas wrap on the year 2022.